So we've got a little bit of follow-up. Do we want to just go ahead and jump into that real quick?
Yeah, I'm really curious about the number 7.
So my homework with last week's episode was to see how many times I used the F-bomb or a derivative, and it's approximately 7. I could have miscounted by 1.
Oh, that's very interesting. It is 5 less than, give or take, 1 than the movie, the number of F-bombs in Not I Know What You Did Last Summer, but is A Few Good Men.
So I did a quick search. I didn't get a chance to rewatch A Few Good Men. I was going to actually rewatch it and count. I did a quick search and didn't see the count on IMDb, but I didn't look overly, closely either.
So I did my homework.
Okay, do tell.
I didn't share it in the notes, though.
That's fine. I mean, the notes are just a rough guideline for remembering what to talk about.
So the reason why it wasn't in the notes is because I looked during the after show while we were talking about it, and it was right there. So on the main iOS 15 features page, that would be apple.com/iOS/iOS-15/features/ the first thing listed under Find My is live locations for family and friends. See your family and friends locations with continuous streaming updates. This provides an immediate sense of direction, speed, and progress when viewing people's locations. First thing.
Yeah, it completely slipped under the radar for me from any kind of presentation.
Oh, me too. Like, I didn't know about it until you said something, and then I was like, well, let me go look and see how far buried it is, and it's like the first thing listed.
Well, I'm glad that it's very prominent in the documentation, at least, because it's a 50-50 shot with documentation from Apple.
Sure. But it feels like they're really proud of it, so.
They should be. It's phenomenal. I added one that was a recent discovery. Since we talked about the lab leak hypothesis last week, there was an article posted either yesterday or today that talked about why it is unlikely that it's a lab leak based on general evidence up to this point. I skimmed it. I didn't go into a lot of detail, but the gist of it is the first outbreak was a few miles away from the laboratory and in a location that had a market where you would expect zoonotic transfer, as well as similar mutations found in, I don't remember I can't recall if it was rats or bats because I thought I read both. But either way, similar mutations that allow for the pervasiveness of infection in humans have been found in animals. And so it was just talking about it's unlikely that it's a lab leak based on this type of evidence. It doesn't rule it out. It just lends more credence to the theory that it was naturally occurring.
So, yeah, I'll mention for the listeners that it's a Los Angeles Times article that you shared with me and are referring to. I remember reading an article in the Atlantic about just that there's a. I remember coming up with this on my own, thinking that there was a higher likelihood of a zoonotic transfer in that area based on how much interaction folks had with bats, and this was sort of like a 1 in a million chance kind of thing. And there's just been enough interactions where it's like, well, on a timeline where you keep having these interactions, 1 in a million happens. And it just so happened. And so then I came across this article in the Atlantic that went into detail and had evidence that supported that theory. Like the general population of the people of Wuhan tend to have a higher presence of something in their. I wish I could remember. I'll see if I can find the article so that you can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll certainly at least include the one that I saw that I sent to you as well, just for anybody who wants to follow up. So I don't remember references to Asimov what's that portion of follow-up?
So I just happened across this this quote from Isaac Asimov from, I think it's 1980, and it's a quote that I've read periodical articles talking about this very sort of thing. I've heard other people in other podcasts use similar words, not necessarily quoting Asimov, but I think this is like where this particular idea not necessarily originates, but maybe could be first attributed to. And so it had this quote, and it just sort of describes what we're seeing in among the people around us. And it says, "There's a cult of ignorance in the United States, and there has always been. The strain of anti-intellectualism has been a constant thread winding its way through our political and cultural life, nurtured by the false notion that democracy means that opinions are just as good as facts." I put just for listeners, I put opinions and facts in brackets, and I can't remember what the original placeholder were. It might have been something to adjust the tense of the quote, but I just want to throw that out there as well.
It's a fantastic quote. Quick sidebar, I watched the first episode of Foundation, the Apple TV Plus series based on Asimov's works.
Oh, yes. Oh, it looks so good.
I also got in trouble for watching it because I watched it while rowing instead of watching it with Emily, but that's a whole different conversation. All that to say, like I will make sure that I find the original quote and put it or link it into the notes. But that really is just hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah, and that was from over 40 years ago. It's a fantastic. I think the closest I've heard someone, and I don't remember if they mentioned Asimov, but somebody who like sort of hit it pretty closely was John Siracusa, maybe like a year and a half ago. It was in the before times when he mentioned it, and so I just remember kind of searching around for that quote, and I think that's how I ended up finding this quote by Asimov, and I'm pretty confident it's something he said or wrote in 1980, and it's just I saved it for a reason. I just happened upon it the other day, and while I was listening to our the last episode, I was just like, oh yeah, I can't not mention it.
So that leads into you have a note in here about other quote. What?
Yeah, I also came across another thing this week. I think it was yesterday, and it was what made me think to say it was that we talked about we kind of took a tangent and talked about some religious things, and one of the things I liked was that what can be asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence.
Very true.
And I was going to say, I wanted to see if you were going to have like oh yeah, I agree with that, or like if you were going to have a different take on it.
No, I mean, so I can craft arguments in both ways, right? Because the entire premise of faith is that you believe what cannot necessarily be proven or disproven, that it relies on your belief and for lack of better phrasing, faith in that particular perspective. In all honesty, though, like it's from a rational perspective, you cannot argue with that statement, or from a logical perspective, it's probably a better way to phrase it.
Yeah, that was all I had for follow up.
I almost want to go further on that one, but I think we should devote the better part of a show to that topic. Just the delineation between perspectives based on rational thought and logical analysis versus what it means to have faith in something. So let's mention that as a teaser for a potential future show.
Yeah, that potential future show gets pushed up in the list of shows with your feedback.
Yeah, we'll see. Because I have a lot of things that I think one of the primary topics for this evening could span multiple shows, and that's more interesting to me than that one. So we'll see. It depends on how the conversation goes.
Well, should we start out with a remembrance based on when the this episode is going to be released?
Yeah, let's do so. I'll let you, because you had the idea, I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, so this episode will be released on the 4th of October, 2021, and that will be the day before the 10th anniversary of the passing of Steve Jobs. And because both of us worked for Apple and worked at Apple at the time of his passing and the transition from him leaving the company due to his sickness and Tim Cook taking over and so forth, I thought it'd be a good thing. Well, it's a good thing for me. I was affected by his passing more than I thought I would. You know, he's a guy. You know, I mean, I never had any interaction with him. The closest I got to him was I almost walked into him with my lunch tray looking for a seat in Cafe Max, and it's just because I was kind of looking around, and he walked quite fast. So it's one of those things where it's like 10 feet away, I noticed like if I didn't stop, I would have run into him, but he didn't notice me at all. So that's how it should be.
I had a slightly closer interaction while out in Cupertino, again, while working for Apple. There was a brief moment of a couple of us just walking around after we had finished lunch at Cafe Max. We happened to pass Steve and Johnny talking, and there was a nod, and that was it. Like, that's the only interaction. It's not like I have anything special to say to it. But I think that also speaks a lot to his awareness of what's around him, because there's no reason that he had any reason or should have needed or could have had any interaction with us. And even though it was just a passing nod, it was an acknowledgement that somebody was there, regardless of their role within the company. And I appreciated that. There was a just general pleasantry, I guess, for lack of better phrasing. Someone who often gets different stories attributed about how ruthless he could be in person, and maybe rightly so, prior in life. But at the point that our lives crossed paths, there was at least always a pleasant acknowledgement of those around, regardless of their role. And from a CEO, you don't necessarily see that very often. And so I appreciated the fact that regardless of who you were, if your paths crossed, he would at least smile and nod.
That's really cool. I think I saw him and Scott Forstall sitting together outside, having a conversation over lunch, and I thought that was really cool. I just remember thinking, I was like, oh, I recognize all these people here, and they're not even like famous people. They're just they're recognizable in this particular circle or this particular, I don't know. So it was
subculture, subgroup.
Subculture, yeah. Wow, it's interesting that subculture is an appropriate term for that. I think one of my favorite, I guess, second-hand stories. I know you've heard this before, but I felt like it was such a good story. I can't remember if this happened in the beginning of 2010 or the end of 2010, but I remember it being cold outside, and I was working at the Apple store on the Upper West Side in New York, and on the first floor there was a side entrance for employees, and one of the specialists that worked for Apple at the time, I think his His name was Peter. I know his name was Peter. I was going to say, I think he was this old, but I don't think that's relevant to the story. But he was outside smoking a cigarette on his break. He still had his Apple pullover on, and I think he probably even had his name tag still on. And Steve Jobs was visiting our store, and he stepped outside and saw Peter out there smoking a cigarette, and Steve said to him, "Do you work here?" And he says, "More than you do." And Steve kind of just had a small chuckle and went back inside. It's kind of
so I've just kind of sidebar. I've read both the Walter Isaacson biography and I'm blanking on the authors, but there was another one that was talking about the recklessness and leadership in general. Also a flattering biography, but it was just a different focus. Generally speaking, it seems that at the earlier parts of Steve's career, that could have easily been the kind of interaction that would lead to a person no longer working for Apple.
Totally.
Whereas in the later years, he was far more relaxed and mellow, at least as far as the portrayals go, and would be subsequently sustained, I guess, for lack of a better word, based on my limited interactions and viewings. It's the kind of thing that as he got older, he'd certainly mellowed more from a reactionary perspective to being able to view everything around him through a more humorous lens. And I always go back to there are myths or stories told about how a wrong word could see you lose your job at any given point, right, over the course of Steve's reign. But the legitimacy of those stories never seems to bear fruit. There's a persona that's crafted about a no-nonsense, unequivocally my way or no way persona, but the subsequent actions from those words don't necessarily line up with the persona portrayed, I think is a good way to put it. I can't think of a substantiated story where someone said, something that could have rubbed Jobs the wrong way, finding themselves jobless. But I can find plenty of substantiated stories where there might be some level of rebuke or some level of just kind of humorous response, like you described the chuckle, and nothing else happened, or anything else that happened as a conversation about, hey, you probably shouldn't do that again, the kind of scenario.
I think he had like a Dread Pirate Roberts kind of thing going on there. Here, let me pay you a sum of money, say that I've hired you so that I can get upset at you and get rid of you and scare you and, keep the crew in shape and so forth. That wouldn't surprise me, but I don't think I wouldn't expect that they went to that extent to do it, but you fire one to scare the rest,
Yeah, I think most of the stories, and this is just as an outsider reading the biographical accounts, I think most of the stories come from the pre-Next days.
Yes.
And following the ousting of Jobs from Apple and having to kind of figure out what that means, from that point forward, he was a different person. I have never heard of an interaction from his return to Apple that seemed to indicate a predisposition to immediate reactionary response.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, like he was the CEO of a like overnight success sort of company in before he was 25, before his prefrontal cortex fully developed. I mean, he was a kid. He went to like overnight millionaire when he was 23. So it's just like it's a lot, and he was already kind of a lot.
I like that you pulled that in because I want to harp on the one thing that is unanimously understood in the realm of psychology. Your brain is not fully developed until your mid-20s at earliest.
Yep.
And the last portion of the brain to develop is the portion that helps you regulate emotional response, which is the prefrontal cortex.
Yeah, so it just, I mean, it fits. And he was a big shot, and I think he knew that. And I don't think being a big shot was like, I can't tell how much that mattered to him, but like he was, I don't think that was his biggest motivator by a long shot. He was driven by other things. He was driven by, driven by legacy more than anything else. Not even legacy, but driven by wanting to change the world. And
so, in thinking about when you proposed this topic, the one thing that I kept coming back to, no matter what I thought about, was the commencement address he gave at Stanford. Do you remember that speech?
Yeah. It was one of the best.
It all roads led me back to this concept of it doesn't really matter what you choose to pursue as long as you have a passion for it and want to see it be better. And that's not the phrasing he used, but that was the gist of the address. And it's where stay hungry, stay foolish came from.
I'll see if I can find that for you and put that clip in.
Oh, I've got a copy of it saved. Like that is a speech that I go back and listen to occasionally because it resonates so much with me at various points, but especially over the past year, that if you find what you love and you pursue what you love, you should trust that pursuit. You can't see how things will convalesce and play out in the future. That's not how our understanding of events works. You have to trust in this choice that I made will connect to the next choice and go from there. And that concept has been the one thing that has continually just messed with my perspective of anything since I heard it the first time. Did I lose you, or did I actually?
No. I was just thinking about it.
It's so abstract when you actually think about the meaning behind what he is presenting. You can't know your next step from a logical, rational perspective. You really can't. You can try to justify it, but you have to trust in something to provide guidance for why you are taking that next step. And it so fully encapsulates this idea that he brought to Apple of merging something so intangible as the liberal arts with something so tangible as a computing device. Because the idea isn't to provide a capability. The idea is to provide an experience, a way of navigating and consuming things that allows you to pursue that which is most interesting or that you are most passionate about without judgment. And I think that's why I appreciate his legacy more than pretty much anyone else that I can point to that has lived in my lifetime.
Yeah. I think what I was thinking when I thought to do this was there were so many times while I worked at Apple that I wanted to sit down and send an email to sjobs@apple.com just to say thank you. Like, going to work at Apple was kind of a necessity at the time of my life. I was at a job that was a dead end job by my choice. Like, it could have turned into a thing. I could have used it to springboard to another thing, but it was in an industry that I no longer wanted to be a part of. And the thing that really made me happy was like messing around on computers. And I was like, let me go see if I can work at the Apple store because, everybody there seems nice. Look at, I had a need, there's an opportunity, and it changed the trajectory of my life. Like, I talk about the training that we received there was like world-class training, world-class customer service training, world-class troubleshooting training, like top-notch. And I, honestly feel like so much of that goes unappreciated. And there were so many times while working for Apple that I thought, I know exactly who it was who decided to open these stores. And when people said it's a bad idea, he disregarded them, and it changed my life. And I never wrote the email because I didn't think it was appropriate. I ended up deciding this is not an appropriate thing to do, but I always thought that. But so many times while I worked there.
It's interesting because I had drastically different motivations for choosing to pursue work at Apple. So prior to working for Apple, I was already in technical environments, for lack of better phrasing. And the training was phenomenal. I don't want to take anything away from it, but it was all stuff that I was already exposed to or accustomed to. Like the training wasn't anything abnormal to me. It was the same way I thought about approaching it. What was interesting is that I could have chosen a number of other places to work at equal or better pay and chose to pursue employment at Apple because of the idea of what it meant for Apple devices to exist within the world, which is to take a step back and say, regardless of your pursuit, regardless of your passion, whatever it is that you want to bring into the world, be it creative, scientific, etc., our goal is to provide a platform and experience that allows you to do so with the least amount of friction. And that idea is what drew me to Apple as a company, and then wanting to be a part of that idea in practice is what actually drove me to accept a position.
It's cool stuff, man.
It's fascinating that it's entirely you can reach a point of wanting to be involved with something, either from a career trajectory perspective or a needs perspective or even a philosophical perspective. And once you get in the door, there's I hesitate to call it a unifying philosophy, because I think that everyone who works for Apple shares a common goal, but the underlying philosophy of reaching that goal may or may not be similar. But the goal is making the experience and life better by leveraging technology. And that's really the summary statement. Like it's not about the slab of glass and metal in your hand, or, the device sitting on the desk in front of you. It's about allowing you to do that work to make a better tomorrow in the easiest way possible by focusing on the experience of doing the work, not what is needed from a technical perspective to achieve the work. And that's really, in a nutshell, what I attribute Steve's vision to be for the company as a whole.
Yeah, that was his legacy.
We will say modern Apple has taken some twists and turns from that, and
yeah,
I mean we're kind of there and kind of not there.
Yeah, but he did a good job of like, no, we occasionally, what would Steve do? But like, nobody's like, the company isn't suffering. Like, oh, like, did they make they made a mistake. Is this a failure? Is this not a failure? I don't know. It's the thing is, it's like they're moving forward and they're doing it in such a way where nobody's second guessing every single move that's made.
I would phrase it as they've made some steps that might have introduced additional friction that shouldn't be there, but they've also made some steps that have made things significantly better and reduced friction from a different number of points.
Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of have to step back and make the argument that whatever vision Steve had for progressing the company definitely provides a guiding premise, and the people who are executing that implementation are not Steve.
Right.
And how much of that is just learning as you go and maybe missteps along the way, and how much of it is the influence of business versus the idea behind implementation. Honestly, I think all of that goes out the window. I think it's just a matter of you had one person providing a very unified and guiding principle, and then you lost that person, and you're trying to figure out how to apply those in a methodical way to guide the trajectory of the business over time. And there are going to be missteps along the way. And I think that actually explains it better than trying to pinpoint specific ideas or thoughts or attributions to a person or a group of persons, because I think that misses the mark. Like, everything that we have seen released by Apple has the intention of doing the same thing. It's just the execution sometimes has not met the same requirements as the intention, or the same expectations as the intention. And sometimes it's just seemed like, well, this is the best we could do with what we had. And those are things that you should expect along the way.
Yeah, I mean, we the mistakes that were made under Steve Jobs' second tenure at Apple were they were there. Just as I don't know that there's any more or less than there are now. It's just they weren't as obvious, because at that time it was like a great timing, because there were so many markets that didn't exist, so therefore they were unsaturated, and they had the ideas to move into those markets like that and revolutionize markets that they took niche markets, made a revolutionary product, and then took that niche market and made it mainstream. They did that multiple times, and it was bound to happen, but they did it in such a way that it made a massive impact.
And I mean, the other thing to remember is just the sheer, I don't even know the best word. The fact that Steve was such a presenter, such a marvelous spokesperson, that he could acknowledge a shortcoming and at the same time promise a level of next step achievement that,
See what you did there.
yeah, I mean, he was such a presenter, and he didn't, we talk about the whole reality distortion thing, but that really wasn't how you would summarize it. It's an acknowledgement that maybe now isn't the best iteration, but we know where we're going. We know what's coming. We know the roadmap, and we know that the final implementation is going to be so phenomenal. There's an unmatched level of being able to explain the vision and what it means from a presenter standpoint that just doesn't exist currently. And it's not to take away anything from the capabilities of modern Apple. It's that there is something to be said for a person who can get on stage and present an idea and a vision and be so passionate about it that you know it's going to happen and you can trust it's going to happen. And so therefore you believe it will happen regardless of how long it takes. That is lacking from modern Apple, but it's only because Steve was so phenomenal a presenter that it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see someone so capable on stage.
You know, I've come to this weird thought, and it tells me that I've watched too much true crime movies and TV shows thanks to my girlfriend. But you gotta think, we gotta be so thankful that Steve Jobs was a CEO and not a serial killer. You know what I mean, right?
Yeah, I follow the train of thought. I do. He was just such a phenomenal showman. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Like, he really was able to take an abstract concept and present it in a way that made you feel what that meant. Like that, it's the highest compliment I can pay to anyone who gets on stage to say or show something.
Yeah. Do you, when you went through Apple Core training, did they show the video of the AT&T CEO talking on stage at some time during the original iPhone announcement? And then they show him talking, and then they show Steve talking, and it's just night and day different.
I mean, it sounds familiar, but I would have seen both regardless. So I don't know for sure if it was within the context of training or if it was just me, seeing it publicly.
I think I have several versions of those training modules and the videos and so forth, but it's interesting. It's just night and day difference. Like he knew what he was doing, and he was very good at it. Like, obviously there was practice, lots of practice, but there's a natural talent there.
Well, practice can only take you so far because we can only assume that Tim Cook, Craig, Phil, anybody that you want to pick that presents at a keynote at this point practices a lot, right? None of them come across quite as passionately and sincerely as Steve did. And it's not to say that they're not coming across with any level of sincerity that is, questionable or anything else. It's just that Steve was a natural presenter. he was absolutely perfect on stage. Whether it meant hours of practice or minutes of practice doesn't matter. It's just that the stage was where he belonged. And it's because he believed every single word that he spoke.
Yeah. I think Phil Schiller is a great presenter to compare him with, because Phil Schiller is an excellent presenter. He's a very intelligent man. He knows what he's talking about. He's not an engineer, but he knows a lot more technical information than people in his position. I can't remember what his position was while Steve was there, but he shared the stage with Steve quite a lot.
Pretty sure he was VP of marketing while Steve was there.
Yeah. That sounds right.
Technically, it's a VP of worldwide marketing, but not to split hairs.
Anyway, so both of them great presenters, but there's definitely a difference. And Phil would be excited about it, and Steve would be excited, but the excitement was a different kind of excitement. So I think they're really good. I think they're really good presenters to compare and contrast to get the whole Steve Jobs effect.
I agree. Steve was very passionate from a level of, this is what I believe and this is what's going to change things. And Phil had a level of giddiness to his excitement about something that made a difference in the way it was portrayed, but no difference in level of sincerity. Like, you absolutely believed everything they said they believed to be true. And was true. Like, I don't want to make it sound like I'm casting doubt on it. It's just that Steve did not convey a level of giddiness. He conveyed a level of trust and passion about what was being done. Phil portrayed a level of giddiness about, this is so cool and this is why. There's a slight difference. Both of them have the same subtext of, this is what we're doing and we're doing it phenomenally and this is why. It's just a different way of conveying the information through speech.
Yeah. If you're going to go back to watch one presentation of Steve Jobs, it would be the Stanford address for me.
I loved it so much, because where else would you have someone speaking to a cohort of graduates and starting with the fact that he dropped out of college?
Yeah.
I mean, and it makes so much sense when you take the entire speech, as a package, but it sounds so dumb, I guess, for lack of better phrasing, if you just try to pinpoint sections of the speech. Like, the idea wasn't, hey, you've wasted your time for dropping out of college. The idea was, find what you are passionate about, find what you love, and hone in on that. Trust the instincts that guide you toward that. Because more often than not, those instincts will take you to a connecting point in the future that you don't realize and can't logically rationalize today. That was it. I mean, that's the gist of the speech. Like, if you're in a place and it just doesn't feel right, doesn't fit, doesn't compute, doesn't do anything for you other than you have to get up and, go through the motions, question it. Like, why is it that you feel like the day-to-day experience is not what it should be? And follow that thought. That's all he was saying. He was just saying it in a way that is kind of funny if you think about addressing a graduating cohort from Stanford. Did I not make sense there today?
No, I just don't know what else to say.
Okay. Just making sure, You know, in my mind, I think like 30 different things at a time. And so I never know if I have stated something in a way that absolutely sounds like babbling nonsense or, you know, it's just, yeah. I love that address, though, so much.
Yeah. It's from 2005?
It was either 05 or 06. I would have to go back and look.
Yeah, it was before, it's interesting to me. It was before the iPhone.
Yeah. No, it was, so the iPod had become the saving grace of Apple's business strategy and trajectory. You could only imagine if you were to provide an address post iPhone, what it would be like.
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, at the time, they were working on it. It was 2 years away, but they were working on it.
Oh, I'm pretty sure the initial designs were done. Like, did you see, I came across an article today that was talking about the iPhone 13 camera modules and something else were frozen and locked in 2 years ago, roughly.
That makes sense. I assume what is released to. So I know. So what's interesting to me is what's released today, like the iPhones that were released today, they were manufactured. Well, in the before times, they were probably manufactured 6 months ago. I remember seeing manufacture dates in iRepair on launch day from 6 months prior to launch day, and I found that really interesting.
So I want to take it a step beyond that because manufacture date doesn't mean anything other than assembly.
I know. So
R&D and final prototyping stage is probably a year and a half to 2 years prior to manufacture date.
Yep. So it's like the iPhone 13 that you see, that was released. Was it last Friday? People were getting them last Friday.
Yes.
That was designed in the before times, like 2018, 2019, like the plans for that.
Yeah.
The pipeline.
I don't think that can be overstated. Like I really think people don't appreciate how much goes into developing a deliverable and what that timeline looks like.
Well, it's because you think about it. It's like a lot of the equipment and pretty confident like the equipment in there is state of the art.
Oh, absolutely.
At least
for sure.
At least the chip is, but it's because their chip fab. The chip fab company is they're like, okay, we can do this process for chips that are going to be manufactured for devices that are going to be sold. There's a whole timeline. We'll have this fab ready by this time, so that chip can go in this phone. And so you have prototype chips, and you have lots of prototype hardware. I don't remember if it was Snazzy Labs or it was someone from the YouTube channel. It might have been Luke Mianis, I think that's his name. One of those guys found a prototype MacBook Pro from maybe one of the first Retina MacBook Pros. I can't remember, around that time. So early 2010s. And it was really rare because most of the time prototype machines get disassembled and they never see the light of day. They get disassembled and those parts get refurbished or recycled. I'm not sure what, but one of them made it out of Apple. One of them, at that time, it would have been One Infinite Loop, and got on eBay maybe a year or two ago. I can't remember when the timeline, but at a point in time where I think the run of those computers was obsolete, at least in the non-California states. So I thought that was really cool that, you could see the different parts and so forth, but it's just like all of this stuff is built ahead of time so they can test it out. And, the software engineers need to have a specific build of Mac OS X or for a machine and so forth. So it's interesting. It's really interesting.
Yeah. I think the biggest question I have is, are we on like a year behind, 2 years behind, 3 years behind. Like what is publicly released, my current assessment would be what is released in 2022 was developed and planned in 2020. Like the final prototype and everything was mocked up and ready to go. That's what ends up getting shipped. Like for some reason, I feel like there's about a 2-year gap between where R&D is and what we see actually as a final product.
Right, because you've got to, you got to leave wiggle room for like, does this work? Does this not work? How many, there's a whole bunch of people who are putting together, coming up with things with these components, and some of them work and some of them don't work. And you pick the best one, and you might mix and match. And there's in addition to chip design, there's board design, because like all their PCBs are custom designed.
Yeah, I would just love to know, excuse me, the time frame. Like, are we looking at a year's difference, 2 years difference, 3 years difference? How does that fall? Just because I find the idea fascinating.
My wet finger in the air is like 2-ish years.
Yeah, I pretty much err on the idea of 2 years as well.
I often think about what would have happened if I'd gotten that. Like when I talk to non-Apple people, I just say it was an internship. But I often wonder what would have happened if I'd gotten that career experience. Because I applied for. Have I told you this?
Maybe, but it's not ringing a bell.
So in 2013, around end of 2013, I applied for a career experience. It was going to be a 6 months career experience. So in normal people terms, it would have been a 6 months a 6 month internship in Cupertino in the early field failure analysis group for portables. So it would have been MacBooks, MacBook Pros. I'm trying to think. Did they have MacBook Airs? That was the lineup. And I think that would have been awesome. And what I do know is that there were I was one of 2 candidates left in the decision, to get the position, and I was the one that wasn't chosen. And I often think about what it was what might have happened if I'd gone out to California.
I can say you probably would not have found yourself where you find yourself today.
Probably not. But that would have been a great jumping off point for R&D. And I mean, shoot, I don't know. I'd do boring things for that company. Like there's a lot of people that get burned. I would do boring things for that company.
Yeah, I understand that, because there are a lot of times where I'll think about career, ideas of where I am versus where I would be. There are a lot of things that I would do that are fairly monotonous and generally boring that I wouldn't have much of a problem with in pursuit of furthering the idea and culture of Apple as a whole, that there's no way in hell I would do where I am now.
Right. And it's really interesting. Like, I feel like aside from, I'm trying to be careful with my words here.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was very vague with what I was saying previously.
Yeah. It was such an interesting company to work for. And ultimately, I think I worked for them for too long.
You worked for the philosophy of what Steve brought to the table.
Yeah.
The merging of the liberal arts with science and technology. You worked for furthering that idea. You didn't work for a specific sub-reason. Like I could care less about the person that comes in with a broken phone or a broken laptop. I really could. But I wanted to make their lives better in the same way that the technology that Apple provided made their lives better. So if I can make a difference in a person's life as a result of a choice, it made sense, right? Like it's very difficult to encapsulate into a statement.
No, I think I felt the same way. Like, how much can I care for a person that I've known for minutes? But at the same time, I did what I did so well because not just because I cared about what I was doing, but because I knew that for a 15-minute interaction, I could make a huge difference in that person's day, that person's week. Who knows, even more. I don't know. So it was not about, for me, it wasn't about the customers. It was about doing what everyone at Apple did, or what the mission of Apple was, and that was
to enrich lives.
Yeah, I was thinking surprise and delight, but yeah, to enrich lives. I think to enrich lives was really that what it was. Do you still have a copy of your Credo?
I do.
Me too.
I actually have a copy that I took the Credo and typed it into a document specifically to be able to reference.
Nice. So another thing that I, sort of changed my life and like, did you ever do the Lominger competencies?
Probably. So full disclosure, like there are so many different competencies and things in the realm of behavioral science that like I've pretty much done them all, but I don't remember which ones are which.
Yeah. So that's like the Lominger companies have been my only exposure to something like that. And I don't know how many of them are. Apple used 67 of them. And like I started like thinking about things that I wanted to do at Apple and things that were available to me. And I mean, it's served me well. It's served me well. Even this year, I at our current job, I was in a mentoring program, and it was relevant that I share. It's either one or two of the Lominger companies that came to mind in this initial discussion I had with my mentee, and over the course of that mentor program, I actually sent her a copy. Like I made a PDF of the specific ones that were relevant, and I scanned it and edited it to remove any sort of Apple specific text, but none of it was such. But over the course of this mentor partnership, my mentee ended up getting a raise, and she credits like some of the stuff that we went over to getting that promotion. And I thought that was really cool. I thought that was really cool. I don't know of any time that I have had that much of an impact on somebody that I hardly knew, especially work related. So it was a cool thing, and it was just like, I don't know, like it was important. Like even though I've been gone almost as long as I worked there, it still had a profound effect on my life, personal and professional.
Well, I mean, at its root, the concept of what they presented from a customer perspective, customer interaction level of training, that alone has had a lasting impact from day one. So if you think about something so simple as how you talk to a customer being so impactful for, a general level of interaction with people, you would only expect that anything beyond that most basic of premise would also provide some level of impact, right? And I specifically kept it vague because at its core, the principle is don't be afraid to say you don't know an answer. It's more trust-inducing to say, you know what, I'm actually not sure. Let's find out together, than it is to seem to have the answers. And so the most powerful phrase that I can remember from the entire training is, I don't know, let's find out. That has served me so well across the board, regardless of company, regardless of context. You know what? I don't have an answer for that today. Let's find out.
Yeah, people respect and appreciate the honesty. They respect and appreciate the boldness it takes to not try to fake your way through something.
Well, I think it's even more basic than that. People appreciate the fact that you're willing to say you don't have all the answers. It's not that you won't find an answer. You don't have an answer now. In 5 minutes, that might be different. In 10 minutes, that might be different. In 3 weeks, that might be different. You don't have an answer now, but you're willing to dig in and find the answer. How refreshing is it to think that someone is willing to take the time to understand a problem and find the solution, instead of just thinking someone is going to provide a scripted response. That's it. That's the beauty of Apple's customer service. When done appropriately, obviously, that has to be the kind of follow-up caveat, because there are plenty of people who just are, idiots in the position they hold. But the
execution has to be there.
Yes. I don't know. Let's figure it out. There's not a problem in the world that can't be overcome with that kind of mentality.
We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after-show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.